You don't get to tell me what I can and can't wear." That was the last thing Diana said before she walked out the door. I was standing in the kitchen in my work clothes, still wearing the shirt I'd put on at 6 that morning. I had concrete dust on my sleeves and a cup of coffee in my hand that had gone cold 40 minutes ago. I wasn't yelling. I hadn't raised my voice once. I had simply said, quietly, that I had a feeling something wasn't right, and that the dress she was wearing was not the kind of thing you put on for a girls' night out. She turned around as she was pulling on her coat and said those words like they were the final answer to a question I had no right to ask. Then the front door closed. I stood there listening to her car back out of the driveway. The engine sound faded down the street. And then it was just me and the kitchen, and the sound of the refrigerator humming, and that cold cup of coffee. My name is Marshall. I'm 34 years old. I build bridges and overpasses and parking structures for a living. I spend my days reading load calculations and stress reports and figuring out where the weak points are in a structure before they become catastrophic failures. I am not a man who panics. I am not a man who imagines problems where there are none. When I tell you I had a feeling something was wrong, I want you to understand what that means coming from a person like me. It means the numbers weren't adding up. It means the structure of my marriage, the thing I had helped build and believed in for 6 years, had developed a crack I could not explain away. I wrote down the time she left on a notepad I kept on the kitchen counter. 7:43 p.m. I don't know why I did that. Something in me knew, I think, that I was going to need to be precise. What happened over the next several weeks, what I found, what I did with what I found, and who I became on the other side of it, is not a story I ever expected to tell. But if you're the kind of person who has ever sat in a quiet house at 2 a.m, wondering if the person you love is who you think they are, then stay with me. Because what I found when Diana came home that night changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, and every decision I made afterward changed everything I knew about myself. If this story matters to you, hit like and subscribe before we go further. This channel is built for the people who need to hear they're not alone. Let's get into it. Garrett is 3 years older than me. He grew up in the same house I did, had the same parents, went to the same high school, and ended up in accounting, which is about as close to what I do as any other discipline can get. We talk in the language of numbers and systems and practical outcomes. When I called him at 9:30 on a Tuesday night and told him what I'd found, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Okay, what do you need?" That is the best thing a brother can say. I said I needed the number of a family law attorney. He asked why he'd have that. He said he was in accounting. I said he was also 41 years old with a wide network of people, and life had a way of making these numbers available. He was quiet again, and then said, "I actually might have someone. Hold on." His name was Patrick Dunn. Garrett had gotten his number 2 years ago from a co-worker whose situation I didn't ask about. He texted it to me while we were still on the phone. I wrote it on the notepad beside the kitchen table, below the notation I'd made about Friday, October 18th, 7:43 p.m. I made an appointment with Patrick's office for the following Friday morning. The receptionist's voice was calm and professional and revealed nothing. She had clearly received calls like this one before. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what came next. Diana was upstairs. I could hear the television on in the bedroom, the sound she always kept on low while she read or scrolled before sleeping. The house was in the condition it was always in at this hour. Quiet, settled, slightly too warm because Diana kept the thermostat higher than I liked. I noticed that I had not left the porch light on that evening. I don't know if I made that decision consciously or if I simply forgot for the first time in however many months. But when I looked toward the front of the house and saw that the porch was dark, I did not get up to fix it. Diana got home from a late work meeting that night, an hour after I'd made the call to Garrett. She came in through the side door to the kitchen and looked toward the front of the house and said, "The porch light is off." I said, "I forgot." She accepted that. She poured herself a glass of water and went upstairs. I sat in the kitchen and thought about the word forgot. I had not forgotten. I had simply stopped. There is a difference between those two things. Forgetting is passive. The habit just doesn't fire. Stopping is a decision your body makes before your conscious mind catches up. The way a bridge stops accepting load when the structural members have each quietly given way. The system knows what it can no longer support before the engineer writes the report. Friday morning, I drove downtown and walked into Patrick Dunn's office with a manila folder containing printed credit card records for 6 months, 3 months of highlighted call logs, the printed LinkedIn profile of Derek Holt, and the notepad page with my time-stamped observations. I had made 2 copies of everything the night before at the office. One set was in the folder. One set was in an envelope in the back of my work truck under a floor panel. I was ready. Patrick Dunn's office was on the 4th floor of a building 2 blocks from the courthouse downtown, in a suite that smelled of coffee and wood polish and the particular neutral air of a place where difficult things are discussed and contained. A framed print on the wall above the waiting area chairs showed a small harbor at early morning. Boats still, water smooth. It is the kind of art chosen specifically to be calming, and I found I appreciated it. Patrick himself was around 50, unhurried in the way that comes from having done hard things many times and no longer needing to rush toward or away from them. He had a clear desktop and a legal pad. He took the manila folder I offered without looking inside it first. He set it to the side. He said, "Tell me what's happened." I told him. I watched him listen. He took some notes. When I finished, he opened the folder and looked through the documents in the order I'd arranged them. He did not react to anything visually. He just read. Then he put the folder down and folded his hands on the desk. He said he wanted to give me a picture of where I stood, not as a guarantee, but as an honest assessment. He said that in this state, adultery did not automatically determine asset division, but it could be a factor the court considered, particularly in combination with other elements. He asked about the house. The house was in my name. I had purchased it with a down payment that came from an inheritance from my grandfather before Diana and I married. We had made mortgage payments jointly from our shared account, but the original title was mine, and the deed had not been restructured. He nodded. He asked about debt. No shared debt besides the mortgage. No children. Diana's income from the agency was similar to mine, but slightly lower. We had a joint savings account, and I had a personal retirement account in my name through my employer. He laid out the general shape of what a divorce would look like, an equitable division of what had been accumulated jointly, a potential claim on the appreciation of the home's value during the marriage, some negotiation over the savings account. It was not simple, but it was not catastrophic. He said people who entered the process with good documentation and stable finances in their own names were not typically the ones who suffered most. He said those people tended to come out with a clear outcome. I asked him what I should do in the immediate term. He said I should not move out of the house, should not close or drain the joint accounts, and should not make any unusual financial moves that could be characterized as hiding assets. He said I should continue to behave normally in my daily life. He said I should not confront Diana before we had a strategy in place. I said I intended to confront her. I said I was not going to pretend nothing had happened indefinitely. He said that was my right, but to give him until the following Wednesday so we could talk through timing. I agreed. I shook his hand and walked back out through the marble lobby and into the October air which was bright and cold and smelled like dried leaves and exhaust and coffee from the cart on the corner. I bought a cup and drank it on the walk back to the parking garage. For the first time in weeks, the pressure behind my sternum had lessened slightly. Not because anything was resolved, but because I had stopped waiting for something to happen to me and had started deciding what I was going to do. That Saturday night, I made dinner. I'm not an elaborate cook. I make the things that work. Roasted chicken, pasta with a sauce I've made enough times that it's automatic now, soups in fall. That night I made chicken thighs with garlic and lemon and roasted potatoes, and I put a green salad together, and I set the table the way we'd set it on normal evenings, placemats and glasses of water, and a candle in the center because Diana had always liked a candle at dinner. She came home from a yoga class at 6:30 and stood in the kitchen doorway, still in her coat, and said, "It smells incredible in here." I said it was almost ready. She changed out of her workout clothes and came back down and sat at the table, and we ate together. The chicken was good. The lemon came through cleanly. She had 2 helpings of the potatoes and told me about a campaign she was leading for a new skincare client, the creative direction, the color palette they were working with, the photo shoot scheduled for next month. I listened. I asked questions. She answered. It was a normal dinner. We were very good at that, at the shape of normalcy. At some point during the salad course, she looked up and said, "This is nice. We should do this more." I said, "Yes, we should." I will tell you what I was thinking in that moment, because I think it matters, and because I have promised to be precise. I was thinking, this is the last time this table will feel this way. Not with bitterness, exactly. More like the particular weight of standing in a place you love for the last time, while it is still intact around you, before the trucks come, before the structure is cleared from the site. I am an engineer. I have walked through buildings set for demolition. I know the specific quality of light inside a place that is already scheduled to be gone. Diana was still talking about the campaign. She was animated, her hands moving as she described the color choices, the way she tilts her head when she is genuinely engaged in something. I can admire the woman my wife was in those moments, before and after what she chose to do. The admiration does not erase the betrayal. Both things can exist. After dinner, I cleaned up, and she sat on the couch with her book. We watched 30 minutes of something we'd both already half-watched 3 times. She fell asleep against the armrest. I turned the television off. I said I had a bad back and was going to sleep in the guest room. This was not entirely a lie. I had a bad back during most of October. She said okay with her eyes already closed and pulled the blanket up. I went to the guest room, which still had the extra boxes of books we'd never unpacked since we moved in, and lay on top of the comforter and looked at the ceiling. The room smelled like cedar and old paper. Outside the window, an owl called once, and then went quiet. I lay there and let myself grieve it properly, the thing that was ending. I gave it that much. I did not rush through it. I let the grief be full and specific and named. The apartment with the Hopper painting, the wedding in October, the sticky notes on the coffee maker in the mornings, her laugh when she was genuinely caught off guard. I let all of that be real for exactly as long as it had been real. Then I closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be a different kind of day. Sunday morning. I was up at 6. I made coffee. I printed the evidence folder again from the printer in the home office, the credit card records, the call logs, Derek Holt's LinkedIn photo, my handwritten notepad pages, and placed everything in a manila folder in the order I'd shown it to Patrick Dunn. I set the folder on the kitchen table. I sat down with my coffee. The house was quiet. Outside, the yard was covered in heavy frost, the grass stiff and white at 8 in the morning, the trees bare enough now that you could see 3 houses down the street where you couldn't in July. A woodpecker was working on something in the oak at the northwest corner of the property, a focused tap every few seconds against the silence. Diana came downstairs at 8:40. She was in her robe. She went to the coffee maker and poured a cup. She didn't notice the folder yet. She sat down across from me and looked out the window. She said, "It frosted again." I said, "Diana?" I waited for her to look at me. She did. I pushed the folder across the table. She looked at it without touching it. She said, "What's this?" I said, "Open it." She opened it. She picked up the first page, the credit card statement with the 3 highlighted charges at the Aldworth Hotel. Her face did not change right away. She turned to the next page. The call logs. She spent longer on that one. She put it down and looked at me. "Marshall," she said. I said, "Derek Holt, creative director at the agency. 29, 74 contacts in the last month. That's the most recent page. There are 3 more months behind it." She said she could explain. I said, "I'm not asking you to." She said it wasn't what it looked like. She said it had been nothing, that it was over, that she had ended it 2 weeks ago, and I had to believe her. I said, 2 weeks ago puts the end of it right around when I stopped turning on the porch light." She looked at me without understanding. I said, "You told me the porch light was off. I said I'd forgotten. I hadn't. That was the night I made the appointment with Patrick Dunn." She said, "Who is Patrick Dunn?" I slid the attorney's business card across the table. She stared at it. The color left her face in a way that was visible, the kind of physiological response you cannot fake, a whitening beginning at her temples and moving down. She said, "No. Marshall, wait. Please. Listen to me." She started to cry. Real crying, not performed. I could tell the difference. She pushed the chair back and pressed her hands over her face, and the sound she made was not the sound of a woman performing grief. I had known this woman for 9 years. I knew what she sounded like when something broke in her. I let her cry. When it quieted, I said, "I know you mean this right now. I believe you're sorry." She looked up. I said, "It doesn't change the decision." She said there had to be another way, that we could go to counseling, that she would do anything, that 9 years was too long to throw away on a mistake that was already over. I said, "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm recognizing that the structure is compromised beyond what I can safely reinforce. There's a technical term for that in my work. It means you don't keep building on it. You start over somewhere that can hold the weight." She said she needed time. I said, "Patrick will be in touch this week." I picked up my coffee cup and went to the home office and closed the door. The days after the confrontation had the specific texture of something that has broken and hasn't finished falling yet. Diana called her mother that afternoon. I could hear her upstairs, talking in a low voice behind the bedroom door, crying at intervals. Her mother called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message. Margaret, Diana's mother, asking me please to call back, saying Diana was devastated, that she hoped we could find a way through this, that she had always thought of me as a son and hoped I knew that. I texted back, "I appreciate your concern, Margaret. This decision was not made in anger. 2 of Diana's friends called me over the next 72 hours. One of them, a woman named Patricia, was mostly kind. She said she knew this wasn't fair to me and that she was sorry I was going through it. The other one, a woman named Gretchen, informed me that Diana had been unhappy for a long time, that I worked too much and was emotionally unavailable, and that maybe I should examine my own role in what had happened. I said thank you for calling and ended the call. I did not respond to anyone with anything beyond the minimum. I had Patrick handling the legal communication. I had my brother fielding the extended family questions. I had my own daily life to maintain, which I was doing. I kept going to work. I want to say that simply because it mattered. I kept going to work. I got up at the same time. I made the drive. I sat at my desk and looked at load calculations and site plans and structural reports. I ate lunch with the same two people I usually ate lunch with, my coworker Sandra and a project manager named Tom. And I did not volunteer what was happening in my life. And they did not ask because I had not changed sufficiently from the outside for them to know. Sandra noticed, though. Sandra was good at noticing things. She was 52, had been in construction administration for 20 years, and had the calm alertness of someone who'd seen every version of a problem show up on a job site. On Thursday, she set a cup of coffee on my desk, which she had never done before, and said, "You okay?" I said, "I found out the foundation was bad. Now I'm rebuilding on solid ground." She looked at me for a moment. She said, "Okay." She took her coffee and went back to her desk. That was the right response. At home, Diana oscillated. She was remorseful when she thought remorse would help, and then distant when it didn't. And then she shifted into restrained anger, a thing I recognized as a defense mechanism she'd used in arguments throughout our marriage, the slight tightening around her eyes, the way she stopped using my name when she addressed me directly. She talked more than once about how difficult this was for her. I did not disagree. I didn't argue any point with her. I had said what I needed to say in the kitchen on Sunday morning, and I saw no purpose in relitigating it. We moved around the house like neighbors who have been informed they are about to no longer share a building. I stopped going to the guest room. I slept in our bedroom. She moved to the guest room. This felt, in its quiet way, like something being corrected. I did not turn on the porch light. The divorce took 4 months. I want to say that plainly because people imagine divorce as a single catastrophic event, and it is not. It is a series of appointments. It is paperwork and waiting rooms and signatures in a conference room. It is a careful accounting of shared things and a negotiation about what was fair, which is different from what was asked for. Diana's attorney made 3 attempts. The first was an argument that my inheritance-funded down payment should be treated differently given the years of joint mortgage payments, which had a logic to it but which Patrick had anticipated and which we addressed with documentation I had already assembled. The second was a push for a larger share of the joint savings, which we negotiated to an even split. The third was a request regarding the appreciation in the home's market value, which we settled at a number that was fair and that I agreed to without prolonged argument. I got the house. Diana moved into her sister Lynn's place on the east side. The Subaru went with her. I bought a used pickup, practical and clean, which I preferred. The day after she moved out, I walked through the house room by room, not taking inventory, but just walking. The bedroom without her things felt larger and quieter. The home office without the boxes she'd been meaning to sort still looked the same. The kitchen felt like the kitchen, which it had always been more mine than hers in practice, the place where I made the things I made, and the room I sat in at night. I took down the Hopper painting from beside the refrigerator. I didn't throw it away. I put it in the hall closet on a high shelf in its paper wrap. Then, over the following weeks, I began to change things. New bedding, a deep charcoal color I'd always liked but she'd never wanted, a new couch, something lower and simpler that didn't make the living room feel like a showroom. I ordered 3 plants for the kitchen window, a rosemary, which I liked for cooking, a small lemon tree that a coworker told me would actually produce if I gave it enough light, and a trailing pothos that I eventually named nothing but spoke to occasionally in passing, which I acknowledge is an unusual thing for a structural engineer to do. I registered for a half marathon. This requires some explanation. Diana and I had both run casually during the early years of the marriage, weekend morning jogs of 3 to 5 miles, easy and companionable. Somewhere in the middle years, the runs had become mine alone as her interests shifted toward her yoga studio, and then eventually I had let the running lapse too, replaced by the general busyness of work and the assumption that there would be time for it later. There was now time for it. I signed up for the Lakefront Half in April, which gave me roughly 4 months from the start of my training. I pulled out my old running shoes, found them still serviceable, and went out on a Tuesday evening into the cold November air and ran 2 miles and had to stop. 2 miles. I stood on the sidewalk 3 blocks from my house with my hands on my knees, feeling my lungs complain, and I thought, there is a gap between where you are and where you want to be, and all you can do about a gap is cross it. I turned around and ran the 2 miles back. I did that every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. The mileage increased. By December, I was running 5. By January, 8. The cold stopped bothering me after the first mile. I bought new shoes in February. By the first week of March, I ran 11 miles on a Sunday morning through a neighborhood whose streets I had never walked before, past houses where people were just waking up, their porch lights still on in the gray early morning. I noticed the porch lights. I thought, I don't have to do that anymore. It was not a bad thought. It was simply a true one. The half marathon was on a Saturday in mid-April. I finished in 2 hours and 4 minutes. Not fast by any competitive standard. Good enough, which was what I had aimed for. The last stretch was a slight uphill grade that had not been clear from the course map, and I walked 30 seconds of it, then decided not to walk anymore, and didn't. Garrett was at the finish line with a cup of coffee. He handed it to me before I'd stopped moving. I said thank you. He said I looked terrible. I said I felt great. We had lunch afterward at a diner 2 blocks from the course, the kind with laminated menus and good coffee and pancakes that were exactly as large as they should be. Our parents drove up from Columbus and met us there. My father, who is not a man who reaches easily across the table for any kind of contact, put his hand on my forearm at some point and squeezed once and said nothing. I said nothing back. It was enough. There is a group of 4 people I see regularly now, a combination of old friends from before the marriage, and a couple of people I met through the running group I joined that winter. We text throughout the week and get together on weekends, sometimes for food, sometimes just to walk somewhere. Nothing remarkable, nothing curated, just the ordinary steadiness of people who have chosen to be in each other's lives. I still live in the house. I finished the backyard project I'd been putting off for 2 years. A flagstone patio with a low retaining wall that I built myself on 3 weekends in May, which Garrett helped with on one Saturday, and did so without complaining, which I valued. The kitchen plants are doing well. The lemon tree has begun to produce small and tentative lemons that are actually more sour than useful, but which I keep anyway for reasons I cannot fully articulate. I am not fully healed. I want to be honest about that because the narrative of recovery has a tendency to compress the middle and skip to the bright ending. And I think that compression does people a disservice. I still have evenings where the grief surfaces unexpectedly. A smell or a Saturday morning light through the kitchen window or a particular segment of street where I used to walk with Diana after dinner in the summers. I let those moments happen. I do not try to engineer my way around them. What I can tell you is that I am not waiting for anything. That is the real change. Not the house or the running or the kitchen plants or even the settled quiet of the evenings. The real change is in the waiting. For 6 years of that marriage, and especially in the final year, some part of me was always waiting. For her to come home. For things to feel right again. For the unease to resolve itself into either confirmation or relief. I was always leaving a light on for something I had no control over. Last October, I installed a timer on the porch light. It comes on at dusk automatically. It goes off at midnight. The front of the house is lit appropriately for the hours when it should be lit. and then it isn't. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to remember. I don't stand at the kitchen window at 2 a.m. watching the amber light over an empty driveway and feeling something unknot or fail to unknot in my chest. The light is no longer a vigil. It is just a light. I told you at the start that what I found when my wife came home that night in the silver dress changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. That is true. But here is what I didn't know to tell you at the beginning. What I found in the months after changed everything I knew about myself. I found out I was someone who could grieve a thing fully and then set it down. I found out I was someone who could run 11 miles through a neighborhood he'd never walked before and feel, purely, the pleasure of moving through space under his own power. I found out the foundation I had been most worried about, the one I didn't trust to hold, was not the marriage. It was me. And that foundation, it turns out, was solid. If this story reached you today in a moment when you needed to hear it, leave a comment below and tell me what you're going through. You don't have to be specific. Just say you're here. Like this video if it helped you feel less alone in something difficult. Subscribe to this channel because we tell these stories for the people who need them. And if someone you know is sitting in a quiet house right now, waiting for something to change, share this with them. You never know who's sitting at a kitchen table at 2 a.m. needing to hear that it gets better. It does. To understand how I got to that kitchen, standing there with cold coffee and a notepad, you have to understand what Diana and I were before that night. Before the dress and the argument and the door closing. Before any of it. We met at the university during our junior year. She was studying art history. I was in civil engineering. We ended up in the same elective on architectural history, which I had taken purely to fulfill a humanities requirement, and which she was apparently passionate about. I remember she sat 2 rows ahead of me and argued with the professor about the symbolism in Baroque church facades with a confidence I found genuinely startling. I waited until after class to talk to her. I'm not a man who usually waits for things, but I waited for that. We dated for 2 years before I graduated. She finished the year after. We moved into a small apartment off the main road, in a town neither of us had particularly strong feelings about, which is exactly the kind of place where you end up when you're young and practical, and building something slowly. The apartment had one window in the kitchen that looked out onto a parking lot. She hung a print of an Edward Hopper painting on the wall beside the refrigerator. I used to make fun of her for it. She said Hopper understood loneliness and light better than any engineer ever could. She wasn't wrong. We got married 4 years after that. The wedding was small. My family came up from Columbus. Her family drove in from just outside of Cincinnati. We had dinner at a restaurant we liked, and afterward we walked back to our apartment through the first real cold of October, and she was still in her dress, and I was still in my jacket, and she said she was happy. I believed her. I was happy too. The early years were good in that unspectacular foundational way that good marriages often are. We disagreed about money sometimes, and about how to spend weekends, and about whether the thermostat should be at 68 or 71, but nothing that went very deep. She taught at a private school for a while, then got her credential and shifted into marketing, and then, about 2 years before the night with the dress, she landed a position at an ad agency downtown. Good salary, creative environment. Late nights occasionally, which she'd warned me about in advance, and which I accepted without any particular concern. I was busy too. My firm had taken on 2 significant overpass projects, and I was the lead structural on both. We passed each other in the mornings with coffee cups and quick conversations, and on weekends we were still us, still the people who walked to the farmer's market and argued about which olive oil was worth buying, and watched old movies we both claimed to love, but usually fell asleep during. Looking back, I can tell you exactly when things started to shift. The problem is, I can also tell you I chose not to see it. That is the part that is hardest to admit. 18 months before the night with the dress, Diana started coming home later. Not dramatically later. Not in a way that demanded explanation or drew a line you could point to and say, that is where things went wrong. It was 20 minutes one week, then 30 the next, then an hour. She had happy hours with work people, which is how she described them. She mentioned names sometimes, but never the same names twice. I asked once if I could come to one of these things, meet her colleagues. She said it was more of an internal team sort of thing, that I'd be bored. I filed that away and did not examine it. She had always been someone who grew restless without stimulation. The ad agency gave her that. I told myself the later nights were the cost of a demanding job, which they were. I had late nights too. I told myself it was just a busy season. There was a Thursday night, maybe 16 months ago now, where she came home at 9:30 smelling like neither wine nor the kind of tired that comes from a long work meeting. I was reading in the living room. She kissed me on the cheek on her way to the bedroom and said she was exhausted. I remember sitting there for a moment with that impression still in my mind, not knowing what I was looking for but aware something was slightly off the way. You're aware of a sound that's just barely outside the range of normal. Like a bolt that's 1/4 turn too loose that you notice with your hand before your eyes confirm it. I told myself I was imagining things. The password on her phone was new. She'd never had one before. We'd been the kind of couple who left our phones on the kitchen counter without any concern. The kind where if your phone buzzed and you were in another room, the other person might glance over and say, "Who was that?" Then one morning I reached for her phone to check the time while mine was charging, and it asked for a PIN. She saw me look up and said something about how her work email had sensitive client files, and IT had required them to put PINs on personal devices. That could have been true. I put the phone down and got up to make coffee, and did not say another word about it. I did not want to be the kind of husband who counted minutes or demanded access to phones. I believed in trust because I believed in us. That was not naivety. I want to be clear about that. It was a deliberate choice I made to hold the marriage in good faith, and I do not think it was wrong to make that choice, even though it cost me. What I didn't understand yet, what I couldn't have named in those months, was that I had begun a kind of accounting without realizing it. Small discrepancies noted in a ledger I wasn't consciously keeping. I was building a record out of instinct, the way an engineer notes unusual settlement patterns on a site he visits regularly. Not alarmed, just watching, just logging. Somewhere in that stretch of late nights and quiet unease, I started leaving the porch light on for her. I want to explain how it started, because it matters. The first time was a practical thing. She was out late in November of the previous year, and we'd had a freeze the night before, and the front steps can ice over in a way that's difficult to see from the top. I didn't want her to miss a step in the dark at midnight, so I left the light on. She came home and said thank you. I appreciated that, and I said of course, and that was all. But the next time she was out late, I left it on again. And the time after that. It became a habit so quietly that I never made a conscious decision about it. I would be sitting at the kitchen table with a book I wasn't reading, and I would get up around 10 o'clock and flip the switch by the front door, and the amber light would come on over the porch and the short stretch of driveway beyond it. The house we bought is a 1970s colonial with a detached garage and a long, straight driveway, and when the porch light is on, you can see all the way to the edge of the property where the mailbox sits. In October, the trees along the street have mostly let their leaves go, and at night, with no foliage to block it, the sound travels farther. You can hear a car a full minute before it turns onto our street. I got to know that sound. The particular engine note of her Subaru, how it changed pitch turning into the driveway, the soft thump of the car door. I would be sitting in the kitchen, and I would hear those sounds. and I would feel something unknot in my chest. That is the thing I am most embarrassed about, looking back. Not that I waited, not that I left the light on, but that I needed her to come home in order to feel all right. That I had handed that much of my peace to someone else without even noticing I'd done it. The light over the porch caught the October cold in a particular way, a slight haze around the bulb when the temperature dropped below 40. I used to see it through the kitchen window and think it looked like a lighthouse, which is not a metaphor I would normally reach for, but it's the one that came. Diana always walked in looking like she'd been out in the world, which she had been, which is not a crime. She smelled of whatever bar or restaurant she'd been at, and her boots were a little wet from the walk from the car, and she'd be carrying her purse and her coat, and sometimes a plastic container with leftovers she'd thought to bring home for me. She was still doing that then, still thinking of me from across her evening out. I would ask how it was, and she would say good, long, and then we would watch something on television for half an hour before she fell asleep. That was the pattern. That was my life. And the porch light was on for all of it, steady as a promise. The night with the dress. It was a Friday, the 3rd week of October. I came home from work at 6:15, and Diana's car was already in the driveway. Good, I thought. A rare night home together. I walked in through the kitchen door and saw her purse on the counter, her laptop open on the table, and the smell of her perfume already in the room, which was unusual because she normally didn't apply perfume on weekday evenings. I changed out of my work clothes and made myself a sandwich and was reading at the kitchen table when she came downstairs at 7:30. I looked up and didn't say anything for a moment. The dress was silver. Not metallic silver, but a deep, cool silver like the inside of an oyster shell. It was backless in that category of backless that leaves nothing to the imagination and stops at mid-thigh, and the fabric caught the overhead kitchen light in a way that was deliberately designed to attract attention. I had never seen this dress before. It did not belong to any version of our life together. It belonged to someone else's night entirely. She was doing her earrings as she walked in, small gold hoops, and she looked up and saw me looking and said, "The girls are doing a birthday thing for Kara downtown." I said, "I didn't know Kara was one of your friends." She said, "From work, I've mentioned her." I said, "Is this what you're wearing?" She stopped with the earring and looked at me. "Yes." I said I wasn't trying to start anything. I said I just thought the dress was a lot for a birthday dinner with coworkers. She said it was a night out, not a business dinner, and she could wear what she wanted. I said I just had a feeling. That stopped her. She looked at me in a way that registered, and then shifted very quickly into something harder. She said, "What kind of feeling?" I said I wasn't sure. Just unease. I said things had felt off between us for a while, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. She set her purse on the counter and turned to face me with that look she got when she decided to reframe a conversation. The one where she widened her eyes slightly and kept her voice very level. She said I had been distant, and that she was not going to be punished for wanting to go out and have one evening with her friends. I said I wasn't punishing her. She said that asking her to justify her clothing was exactly that. She put on her coat, picked up her purse, and walked to the door. She stopped in the doorway with her back to me and said, "You don't get to tell me what I can and can't wear." And then she was gone. I sat back down at the kitchen table. I looked at the sandwich I hadn't finished. I looked at the book I hadn't been reading since she came downstairs. I looked at the empty doorway where the cold air had briefly come in, and then stopped. I picked up the pen on the counter and wrote on the notepad, Friday, October 18th, 7:43 p.m., left in the silver dress. I don't know why I wrote it, but I did. I left the porch light on. Of course I did. Habit. But I was aware, as I flipped the switch, that the gesture felt different tonight. Not hopeful, just mechanical. The amber light came on over the empty driveway, and I stood at the kitchen window looking at it for longer than I should have. The October night was cold and very still. The neighbor to our east had their television on, the sound just barely audible through the wall, the rhythm of a laugh track repeating at intervals. Across the street, a dog barked twice and then stopped. Somewhere down the block, a pile of leaves was burning, that particular dense, sweet smoke of late autumn that I have always liked, and that tonight felt like something ending. I made a fresh cup of coffee at 8 and sat at the kitchen table with the notepad in front of me. At 11:30, I called her. 3 rings, then voicemail. Her voice on the recording, professional and light. I said I was just checking in, touch base when she could. I sat back down. At 1:15 in the morning, I called again. Voicemail immediately this time. Phone was off or on Do Not Disturb. We had location sharing turned on. This was something we'd set up 8 months ago when her mother had gone to the emergency room with a cardiac scare, and Diana had driven 2 hours alone in the middle of the night, and we'd both agreed afterward that it would be good to have for emergencies. Neither of us had ever made it a point to track the other. It existed as a safety net. I had never once checked her location in the months since we'd set it up. I checked it at 1:20 in the morning. The pin was on a building in the Arts District downtown. I pulled up the address on my phone. The name that came up was not a bar. It was the Aldworth Hotel, a small boutique property that had opened 2 years prior, the kind of place that had a lobby bar with low lighting and a cocktail menu that cost as much as a dinner, the kind of place you went when you wanted to be seen in a particular kind of way by a particular kind of person. I sat with that information. I did not call anyone. I did not text. I put the phone face down on the table and looked at the kitchen wall for a while. The coffee was cold again. The laugh track from the neighbor's television had stopped. I could hear the refrigerator and the wind moving through the trees outside, and nothing else. At 2:47 in the morning, I heard her Subaru in the driveway. She came in through the front door, and the cold came in with her. She still had on the silver dress. Her makeup was intact, except at the edges. Her hair had been touched at some point in the evening and put back, but not with the same precision as when she left. She looked at me sitting at the kitchen table and said, "You waited up." I said I did. She said, "I'm tired," and walked toward the stairs. I heard the shower start at 2:53 in the morning. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to it run. Diana did not shower after nights out with work friends. She hadn't done it once in 6 years that I could recall. We'd been together long enough that I knew her routines the way you know the load-bearing walls of a house. I looked at the notepad. 2:53 a.m. shower. Then I turned off the porch light and went to the guest room and lay down on top of the covers in the dark. Saturday morning. I was already up and had made coffee by the time Diana came downstairs at 8:45. She was in her robe and her hair was down, and she moved through the kitchen with the slightly bruised quality of someone who'd stayed up too late. Except instead of reaching for me the way she might on a slower weekend morning, she reached for her phone first, and then for a glass of water from the tap. I said good morning. She said it back without looking up. We sat at the table. I put a cup of coffee in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it. Then she said, "I feel like you made me feel guilty before I even left last night." I said, "Good morning, Diana." She said she was serious, that she'd been trying to enjoy herself with her friends, and the whole time there was this weight on her because of how our conversation had gone. I said, "Why did you shower in the middle of the night?" She looked up. I said it again, even-toned. "When you got home at 2:40-something, you went straight to the shower. You've never done that after a night out." She held my gaze for a moment, and then looked back down at the coffee. She said, "I always shower after I've been in a bar environment. The smoke and everything gets in your hair." I said, "Ohio went smoke-free in bars in 2006. She said there had been people vaping, that the smell stuck to her hair. I nodded. I didn't say anything else about it. I cleaned up the breakfast things and told her I had some work to do, and went to my home office, where I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I typed the name of the hotel into the search bar. The Aldworth Hotel on Meridian. The website came up. I clicked through to their venues section. There was the lobby bar, the kind of place I had imagined, low and warm, amber lighting, exposed brick, velvet chairs. There was a rooftop lounge accessible to hotel guests. There were guest rooms starting at $212 a night. I sat and looked at the screen for a while. Then I pulled up our credit card statements. We shared one card for household expenses. I scrolled back 4 months and began reading each line carefully, the way I'd read a materials specification on a bridge project, looking for anything that didn't fit the expected load pattern. I found it on the 3rd month back, a charge of $43 to Aldworth Food and Beverage LLC. Then, the month before, $61 to the same vendor. Then, 2 months before that, $55. 3 charges, 3 months. The Aldworth Hotel Bar. On nights she had told me she was out with colleagues. I closed the laptop. I put my hands flat on the desk. I thought about the Hopper painting still hanging next to the refrigerator in the kitchen, the one Diana had put up in our first apartment, the one about loneliness and light. I thought she'd understood something I hadn't. Over the next 2 weeks, I did what I was trained to do. I audited. There is a process in structural engineering called a forensic investigation. You do it after a failure, or before one, to determine exactly where the load went wrong, where the material gave out, where the design assumptions didn't match reality. You don't go in emotional, you go in systematic. You document everything. You follow the evidence to its conclusion without prejudging the finding. That is what I did. I pulled every credit card statement for the past 6 months and went through them line by line. I printed each one. I highlighted charges that appeared on evenings Diana had described as work events or girls' nights. The Aldworth appeared 3 times, as I'd already seen. But there were others. An upscale tapas restaurant I'd never heard of. Twice. A parking garage in the Arts District 4 Friday evenings in a row. Charges of $12 each, which is approximately what you pay for 2 or 3 hours in that area, not enough for a full workday. A wine bar called The Linden on 3 separate Thursdays. I made a spreadsheet. Dates in 1 column, venues in the 2nd, what she had told me in the 3rd. I left the 4th column empty, labeled simply, Note. Then I looked at our phone plan. We shared a carrier account, and I was the billing administrator, which meant I could log into the carrier website and pull call and text records for both lines. I had never done this before. It felt intrusive in a way that made me take a long breath before I clicked into her records. The data was there. In the past 30 days alone, 74 calls or texts between Diana's number and an unknown contact. The cadence was not random. There were clusters in the evenings, after 8, sometimes running until midnight or later. There were short calls mid-morning, quick messages. There was a pattern to it that was recognizable, the pattern of someone maintaining contact across a day, not coordinating a single event. I wrote the unknown number down on a piece of paper. Then I did a reverse lookup on it through a service that cost me $4.99. The name that came back was Derek Holt. I wrote that name down. I opened LinkedIn from a private browser window. I searched Derek Holt and narrowed the results by the name of Diana's ad agency. He came up on the 2nd result. He was 29. His profile photo was professional. Dark hair, a collared shirt, the kind of photo that projects exactly as much as it intends to. His title at the agency was Creative Director. He had been employed there for 14 months, which was less time than Diana, but close enough that they would have moved through the same onboarding, sat in the same meetings, built the kind of proximity that comes from being new somewhere at the same time. I read his profile once. Then I closed the browser. I sat in my truck in the parking garage at my office building for approximately 4 minutes. I am being precise because I looked at the clock when I got in and when I started the engine. In those 4 minutes, I cried in the way men cry when they've been holding something for a long time and the container breaks. Not loudly, just a pressure behind the eyes that finally gave way. Then I started the truck. I had work to do. I want to tell you about the hammer emoji. I found it the following evening, on a Tuesday, when Diana's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she was in the bathroom. I wasn't snooping. I was walking past to refill my water. The screen lit up with a preview of a message, and I saw the sender listed not as a name, but as a single emoji, a cartoon hammer. I kept walking. I refilled my water. I sat back down at the table. A hammer, the universal icon for my profession. We had joked about hammers and wrenches and tools in the early years of the marriage, her calling my work playing with Legos for adults. It had been warm then, that teasing. But Diana wouldn't label a work friend's contact with a hammer unless there was a specific, known reason. Unless that contact was a joke between them. About me. I had the name already. Derek Holt. I had his job title and his photo and the pattern of his calls. But the hammer emoji placed me in the story in a way I hadn't been before. I was not an absent husband they'd kept separately from their affair. I was a reference point. A figure to be navigated around, named with a small symbol, present in their messaging as an obstacle or a punchline or both. I cannot tell you precisely what I felt in that moment. The closest I can come is this. I felt the way you feel when you are doing a stress analysis on a structure and you realize the load has been misrepresented from the beginning. Not surprise, exactly, more like a grim confirmation of something the numbers had already been telling you. I did not touch her phone that night. I did not need to. I had enough. That is the word I kept coming back to. Enough. I had enough evidence to know what had happened. I had enough information to make a decision. I had enough dignity left to make that decision deliberately and not in the wreckage of an argument at 2 a.m. I thought about what Diana's affair actually was, not the moral dimension of it, but the structural reality. She had taken the trust we had built over 9 years, the history, the apartment with the Hopper painting, the wedding in October, the routines and inside jokes and shared grocery lists and the way she used to leave sticky notes on the coffee maker when she got up early, all of that, and she had placed it in service of something that was happening in boutique hotel bars with a 29-year-old named Derek, who had labeled her husband as a cartoon tool in his contact list. That was the reality. And once you can see a structure clearly, all the way to its failure points, you cannot pretend the load is still safe. You have to make a decision about whether to reinforce it or condemn it. I knew what my decision was going to be. I had known, I think, since the parking garage. But I needed to do it right. I needed to protect myself legally, financially, and practically. I was not going to torch my own life in a rage. I was going to handle this the same way I handled everything I'd built, methodically, precisely, and with both hands steady on the plans. I called my brother Garrett that night. There is something I want to say about anger. I have been asked by Garrett and by the few friends I told the full story to whether I was angry, whether I am angry now. The question comes with an expectation built into it, the implication that anger is the reasonable and appropriate response, that a man in my position who does not express rage is either suppressing something dangerous or not fully grasping what happened to him. I was angry. I want to be clear about that. In the parking garage, in the 4 minutes before I started the truck, what moved through me was not only grief. There was real anger in it, the specific heat of having been deceived by someone you extended full trust to, of having your patience and your goodwill and your deliberate choice to believe the best of a person used against you as a kind of cover. But anger, as a sustained operating condition, is not one I find useful. This is not a moral position. It is an engineering one. Sustained anger is a load applied without purpose. It stresses the structure without producing any work. The structure fatigues. The man inside it fatigues. And in the end, the only person bearing the load is the one who is angry. Diana is living her life. I do not know the specifics, and I do not seek them out. I heard through a mutual friend in March that she and Derek had separated, which I registered and then set down without further examination. That information belongs to her story, not mine. What I know is this. The day I walked out of the courthouse after the final proceedings, I stood on the front steps in the February cold for a moment and felt, in a way I had not expected, a sensation of extraordinary lightness. Not happiness, not triumph. Lightness, which is different. The sensation of a load properly resolved and transferred. The feeling of a structure that no longer has to hold more than it was built for. I drove home. I made dinner. The kitchen smelled like rosemary from the plant on the windowsill. I ate alone, which is something I am still learning to do without thinking about what it means. And at some point I stopped thinking about what it means and just had dinner. That is what it looks like. The ordinary evening on the other side of an earthquake. It looks like dinner, and the smell of rosemary, and the kitchen light, and outside the window the neighborhood doing what it does, and the porch light coming on automatically at dusk because you set a timer and moved on. That is what changed everything.